On slide 30 of your slides presentation, the PowerPoint, we discuss supply. And supply is quite similar to the demand concept, except that whilst demand is about consumers, supply is about producers. So the same way that we refer to the demand sector as the consumption sector, we refer to the supply side as the production sector. And just like we have the law of demand that states that there is a negative relationship between the price of a good and the quantity of the good that is being demanded, and that relationship is negative. On the supply side, the law of supply states that there is a positive relationship between the price of the good against the quantity of the good that is being supplied. But like demand, supply also has got its own factors that determine it. And as you would expect, supply would be a function of the price of the good that is being supplied, amongst other things. So producers would supply a product dependent on the price that the product is going to fetch in the market. The higher the price, you'd expect that the suppliers would supply more, which is the opposite really of the demand what consumers would do when the price is high. Also, suppliers would supply more if they had better equipment of producing a particular product. So, for instance, China can supply lots of goods because they are so capital intensive. The East, has now become very technological in terms of how it produces even the most basic goods. So technology is also a factor on how much quantity of a particular product producers would supply. So you would have technology there. Again, prices of competing goods, substitutes, are also dependent on how much producers would choose to supply for a particular good. So if one particular good can attract a higher price, you would expect that producers would want to produce more of the good from which they would get higher prices. So prices of substitutes are very important. Input prices as well. It's not just the good in the market that the suppliers want to supply, or the price of the goods that they want to supply, but it's also the prices of inputs. So what goes into that product? If they can supply a particular product because the inputs are at a certain level which is lower than the cost of other inputs, obviously producers would choose to limit their cost and produce a good whose inputs are lower compared to the alternative. So that would be the prices of inputs. So inputs determine, the prices of inputs determine how much of a particular good is being supplied. Like we talked about future expectations in terms of consumers, it is also the case that the future prices of particular goods also determine whether suppliers or producers would supply more of a particular good or not. So you would want to invest in supplying a particular good that you expect its prices to go up. So if you know that a particular good is going to attract a higher price in the future, you're going to invest more into targeting that particular market. So that is future prices. of the good that you want to invest in. In any case, so all of those would be the factors that determine what quantities suppliers want to supply a particular product at given the price that's going on in the market. Hence, the law of supply, like the law of demand, is based on the price of the good in question as well as the quantity demanded of that particular good. In this case, it would be the quantity demanded and the quantity supplied. At market equilibrium, the two should be the same. In any case, the relationship would be a positive relationship. So the quantity that is being supplied would depend on the price, or would move up with the price of a particular good that you can get at a market. So a lower price would lead to suppliers supplying a lower quantity of that particular good. A higher price, on the other hand, would lead to suppliers supplying more of that particular good. And really that's the relationship between prices of a particular good and the quantity, the units of the good that is being supplied. Like we dealt with the changes in these factors. Because the law of supply is really a law between the prices of the good and the quantity that is being supplied, we would then expect that the changes in price. So we said supply is a function of the price of the good, technology, input prices, future expected prices. What are we leaving out? Price of substitutes. Price of substitutes. We would expect that because the relationship that we are mapping out is between that particular factor and the quantity that is being supplied, that a change in the price of the good would lead to a movement along the supply curve. So a change from this price to that price would lead to a movement along the supply curve. But a change in all the other factors of supply would lead to either a shift outward of the supply curve or a shift inward. Some textbooks again refer to this as a rightward shift versus a left shift of the supply curve. So, for instance, if the level of technology improved in a particular country to an extent that at the same price, suppliers could produce more of the good, then the supply curve would shift to the right, parallel to itself. So at the same price, more of the good would be supplied. More of the good would be supplied. At the same price, if, say, technology were to improve. On the other hand, if the prices of inputs were to increase, what do you think is going to happen to the supply schedule? Well, if it's more expensive to produce a particular good, then the supply curve would shift to the left, or supply would decrease. At the same price, you would have produced more if the costs of inputs were lower, but because the prices of inputs have gone up, at the same price you would be producing less of that particular good. So those are the shifts, either the shifts as caused by these inputs, and the movement along the supply curve as caused by the changes in that particular factor. And that's really because on the y-axis you've got that input, and then you've got the quantities that are being supplied. But market equilibrium is not only determined by demand or supply only on its own. There has to be an interaction between what consumers want at a particular given price with what suppliers are producing at that same particular price. So it is the forces of demand and supply that determine that point, that equilibrium point. And the interaction between the demand curve and the supply curve gives us or signals to us the price at which a particular good should be sold in a market. And it also tells us how much of that good is going to be supplied in the market. So at equilibrium, the quantity demanded equals to the quantity that is being supplied. There is no waste. So everything that is being produced is everything that is being consumed. And this is really the efficient points on the PPF that we were talking about, is determined by market forces. So we can see already that demand and supply forces, when they are allowed to interact and the market clears, that assists an economy in operating along the production possibilities frontier that we started off with in earlier discussions. And really, that is the determination of market equilibrium.